Hello, and welcome to Top Story Daily Edition. I'm JNS Editor-in-Chief Jonathan Tobin. Thanks for joining me for another discussion on the most pressing issues in the Jewish world. Please like, subscribe, and give us good reviews when you listen to the show. Now let's get started. For many on the left, Asna Tabassum is America's latest free speech martyr. Close behind her are Dani Marzuka, Celine Khalife, Malak Afene, and Columbia University faculty members Joseph Massad, Catherine Franke, and Mohammed Abdu. All are being targeted by the supposedly all-powerful Jewish community for pro-Palestinian opinions and criticizing Israel. That's the narrative we're hearing in much of the corporate media and from liberal pundits this week, as they attempt to change the national conversation about an epidemic of anti-Semitism in the streets of America's cities and on college campuses since the October 7th Hamas massacres in southern Israel. The goal of this effort is to portray the pushback against hate speech directed at Jews as a form of repression that is stifling debate. Those putting forth these claims assert that Jews who speak up about anti-Semitism are cancel culture mobs. These pro-Israel vigilantes, we are told, seek out innocent people who become the focus of unfair opprobrium that leads to denial of their rights and in some cases even cost them their livelihoods. Those who are denouncing the attacks on these people are being both dishonest and hypocritical. Rather than merely voicing unpopular opinions, these alleged martyrs to freedom are actually voicing hate speech. And far from being denied the right to say what they want, the backlash against them is merely depriving them of the privilege of venting their anti-Semitic bile in venues like classrooms, private dinners, and graduation ceremonies. Those are places where rules against hate speech exist, yet they are rarely, if ever, enforced against anti-Semites. However, anyone who voices racism against African Americans, Hispanics, Asians, or any other minority protected by the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, DEI, rules are always dealt with harshly and subjected to peremptory punishment. Others are merely being held accountable by employers for public conduct, like tearing down posters of Israeli hostages and posting anti-Semitism on social media accounts that, like any other form of disreputable behavior, is the sort of thing most businesses understandably wish them to distance themselves from. Worst of all, this narrative about pro-Palestinian victims is intended to erase, if not entirely justify, the surge in Jew hatred that has been felt all across the world, but is particularly shocking in the United States, a place where bigotry for Jews has never been officially sanctioned. The Hamas atrocities of October 7th, the largest mass slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust, unleashed a wave of animosity towards Israelis and Jews throughout the globe, including in places like Western Europe, where anti-Semitism has been prevalent for some time. But the realization by mainstream American Jews that institutions like elite universities had become bastions of hostility has served as a wake-up call for them, and others that this country is undergoing a cultural shift enabling anti-Semitism. Each of these cases says something unfortunate about this moment in history. We are now constantly being told that it is the pro-Palestinians who are under fire from alleged Islamophobes. But what is really going on is that hateful speech against Jews has not just been accepted, but glamorized by intellectuals who have been indoctrinated in ideas like critical race theory and intersectionality, which grant a permission slip for anti-Semitism. Tabassum has gained notoriety because, despite being named this spring as a valedictorian at the University of Southern California, she won't give a commencement speech due to what the school described as security concerns. She became controversial after the discovery of social media posts accusing Zionists of being racist and advocating for the destruction of Israel, as well as making false charges about Arabs being ethnically cleansed by Jews. Her defenders claim that all she is doing is expressing sympathy for Palestinian victims and criticizing Israel's government and military. While her apologists are right that the school isn't being honest about the reason for their decision, they're being dishonest when they say she has a free speech right to proclaim such falsities at the school's graduation ceremonies. That was the argument made by David Myers, a leftist Jewish history professor at UCLA, who penned a piece about the issue in the Los Angeles Times with Salam al-Mariyati, an anti-Israel activist who has defended Hamas and Hezbollah, blamed the 9/11 attacks on Israel, and claims that Jews weaponize anti-Semitism. Tabassum is free to stand on a street corner and spatter hatred for Israel and Jews. But regardless of her academic record, she isn't entitled to use the podium at USC's graduation for that purpose. The same is true for Malak Afaneh, a University of California at Berkeley Law School student who attempted to hijack a private dinner at the home of Dean Erwin Chemerinsky, a prominent legal scholar and teacher who has been attacked on campus for his support for Zionism. When Chemerinsky's wife, Catherine Fisk, herself a law professor, sought to restrain Afaneh and take away the microphone she brought with her, the student fallaciously claimed that she had a free speech right to speak. Fisk rightly answered, "No, this is my house. The First Amendment doesn't apply." Fisk was subsequently lambasted for supposedly assaulting the student and denying her their rights. The trio of Columbia faculty members, Massad, Frankie, and Abdu, were part of the discussion at the hearing on anti-Semitism held by the U.S. House of Representatives, at which Minouche Shafik, that university's president, and other school officials testified. Shafik managed to avoid the same kind of disaster that other university presidents walked into last December, when the same committee heard them claim that it depended on the context as to whether advocacy for the genocide of Jews violated their school's policies. Still, Shafik didn't have any good answers as to why she had permitted a hostile atmosphere for Jewish students to be created on the New York City campus, largely because of people like that trio and the students who mimic their praise for Hamas murderers and voicing blood libels against Israelis and Jews. Again, the defenders of those professors, in addition to the students there and elsewhere who march around campuses chanting for the destruction of the one Jewish state on the planet, from the river to the sea, and in favor of terrorism against Jews everywhere, globalize the Intifada, say they're merely exercising their right to free speech. Yet every school in this country has rules forbidding hate speech. And were a mob of students, aided and abetted by faculty members, as is often the case with anti-Israel protests, to call for violence against African Americans or any other protected minority group, let alone to demonstrate in favor of hate groups and terrorists like the Ku Klux Klan, the equivalent of Hamas, they would be expelled or fired from their jobs so fast it would make their heads spin. The point being that those who think pro-Palestinian speak, which in practice means advocacy of hatred against Jews, should be protected, would never think of defending anti-Black, anti-Hispanic, or anti-Asian hate speech, or speak of those doing so as idealists who deserve praise for their courage rather than scorn. They make the exception for anti-Semitism precisely because of the influence of woke ideology, which divides the world into two groups locked into perpetual conflict, people of color who are victims and their white oppressors. The neo-Marxists behind these ideas and their Islamist allies wrongly define Israel and Jews in this manner, despite the ludicrous nature of any such claim about a conflict that has nothing to do with race. Nor does it make any sense to label the Jews, a small minority group who have been subjected to violence and terrorism worldwide for millennia, in this manner. Nor are Jews settlers or colonialists in their own country. They are the indigenous people of Israel. Yet they are the sole group that is the focus of the only international movement to deny anyone's indigeneity. Professors who engage in hate speech against Jews, not to mention introducing anti-Semitic ideas into their classrooms, aren't simply exercising academic freedom to discuss controversial topics. They aren't merely criticizing an Israeli government's policies. They're advocating for the destruction of Israel and endorsing groups that wish to commit genocide against Jews, as well as applauding acts like the October 7th atrocities, which were merely a trailer for more to come. That is why schools must adopt the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's working definition of anti-Semitism, which specifically cites this kind of speech as an obvious example of Jew hatred. Those who oppose this definition do so precisely because they want to grant an exception to anti-Zionism. But anti-Zionism, whether expressed by academics, students, or street mobs, seeks to deny rights to Jews to live in security and to defend themselves in their ancient homeland that no one would deny to any other people. And that is anti-Semitism. The cases of Marzuka and Khalife are also instructive. They were the focus of a sympathetic feature in the Washington Post that claimed that they were the victims of online mobs of pro-Israel bullies. Marzuka, who worked for a marketing firm, and Khalife, a therapist, were outed by the Stop Anti-Semitism group for engaging in anti-Jewish and anti-Israel hate speech. Marzuka has said in an Instagram live post that radical solidarity in Palestine means not apologizing for Hamas, which the watchdog group not unreasonably said was pro-Hamas. Khalife was filmed tearing down posters of Israeli hostage victims and citing a conspiracy theory that they were kidnapped by Israel, not Hamas. She later told the Post that she had only torn them down because the posters said Hamas was a terrorist group and therefore minimized the Palestinian struggle, which is equally false and hardly more defensible. Both instances were highlighted online by Stop Anti-Semitism, along with their places of employment, prompting the group's followers to write and ask why they had such people working for them. As a result, both were fired. Some claim that it's unfair to publicize the activities of non-celebrities this way, and that their punishment was too harsh. And the Washington Post did its best to depict Stop Anti-Semitism and its financial donors as the villains of the story. But would they feel the same way if the pair were endorsing the KKK or engaging in hate speech against blacks? Not likely. Nor is it reasonable, nor is it unreasonable for employers not to want to be associated with people who do hateful things in public or on social media. If you send appalling posts or engage in public acts of prejudice, you lose the right to anonymity. Contrary to the Post, Marzuka and Khalife are the bigots here, not the activists at Stop Anti-Semitism. What we are seeing in these efforts to portray hate mongers as victims and free speech martyrs is not so much cases of cancel culture as an attempt to sanitize anti-Semitism and to demonize those who call it out. Unlike Europe, the United States has a First Amendment to the Constitution that protects the ability of Americans to say what they like so long as it doesn't involve violence. All of these so-called martyrs are free to go on engaging in hate speech against Jews in Israel. What they and their defenders want is not so much the right to continue speaking in this manner, but for their anti-Semitism to be normalized and treated as something reasonable people should be able to agree to disagree about. Advocacy for the genocide of 7 million Israeli Jews and the destruction of the only Jewish state on the planet, however, isn't fair comment. Those who wish to normalize these ideas aren't defending free speech. They are advocating for a society in which Jews are hounded, targeted, and subjected to intimidation and violence. And that is an immoral proposal that no decent American can ever accept. Thanks for listening. Please remember to tune in every day for Top Story Daily Edition and every week for the full hour-long JNS TV program. Whether you're listening to us on Apple, Google Play, Spotify, or any of the other podcast platforms, or on the JNS YouTube channel, please like and or subscribe to Top Story, click on the bell for notifications, and give us good reviews. Please write to us at editor@jns.org and let us know where you listen or watch the show and what you think about it. And remember, keep reading and thinking for yourself.